You had something you wanted to
Well,
read.
I'm just thinking back on like my journey with it all because when I remember hearing this idea of spirituality from the counselor and I was finally able to start listening. I'm sure like in and out of rehab and AA it had been a concept that was there, but I wasn't actually ready to listen to it. Like, why do I keep doing this thing? What piece is missing? And that's the piece that was missing. And so a big part was separating spirituality from religion because me and God weren't on good terms like early on. And I don't consider myself a Christian, which is the religion that I grew up with. So in certain recovery spaces, they're talking about like you need God or a higher power. And I'm like, I don't vibe with that. Like, am I still going to be able to do this thing if I don't vibe with that? And that's such a big part of it. But like, what were your experiences with it?
So I didn't really. It didn't really bother me because even before I came into the program, or even back as a kid, I would say, I would feel like I'm not religious, but I do believe in a higher power, and a lot of that comes from just being kind of nerdy and dorky, and like I love space, right? So it's like one day I just remember like trying to fathom like how big the universe is, and like something about like, and it just like it kind of I learned about things like it's easy to intellectualize for me the difference between like it's easy to intellectualize a concept of a higher power, right? And even down to realizing that when people talk about coincidences or happenstance or fate or destiny or God or everything like that, it's like it always kind of sounded like they were talking about the same thing to me, right? Something that they couldn't see that kind of put them in these positions that they had no control over, and we just had to roll with it. And sometimes it was hard to understand why things happen, and it's that simple. And for me, it became easier to distill it down to a 3-letter word than to say an all encompassing like spirit that's just guiding, or like force that's just guiding everything, and everything's just kind of happening like the way it's supposed to. And
The 3-letter word being God.
yeah, because it's
Which
path of
some
least
people-
resistance.
Yeah, but which some people also struggle with, like
Right.
whether it's religion tied or not. Like I remember I couldn't say God in the rooms for like the first year or so, and I always said HP, higher power, my higher power this, my higher power that, and
say
not
the same.
defining it because even saying God felt too religious. Even though now I know like Christianity doesn't have a monopoly on the word God,
Right.
and it can mean anything. It can be tied to a religious body or ideal, or it could just be good orderly direction, or I know somebody
hate
said
that one.
going outside. Wait, going? I don't know. What is it? Getting in nature? I don't know. Something. It could be a lot of different things. Good orderly direction is the one that they say a lot. But like to your point, common language.
Yeah.
When you're with a group of people being people trying to support each other and getting sober or getting well or whatever, we all need to agree on some terms sometimes, right? So God is a term that we can use, even though we all have a different image of it in our head.
Right. And there's this, when people talk about the idea of God, is like, how am I supposed to believe in this like white man with a long beard and
Hey, white. No,
and just up in the sky like making things? Is like dude, like that's an image that should have left you with the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. That's an image that they put on something to make it more easily understandable for children. You're not a child. Grow the fuck up. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is, and at a certain point, it's like, at a certain point, I feel like people understand what you're trying to say, and it goes back to the rehab thing. They just need a reason to argue, right? Because the fact of the matter is, I had no more control over you being in that seat when I walked into rehab than I do of what the temperature's going to be tomorrow. You know, I had zero control. I had no more control over who my parents were going to be than I do of the sun rising. You know, I have no more control over a lot of times my own thoughts than the tides. They just come and I deal with them the best that I can. And, you know, we get into these things where ultimately it comes down to feeling some type of way that you didn't have control over things. And that's what we're trying to get over, right? Because like, even think about like one thing that you realize is that one argument that people always use against God. Well, if God exists, then how come like children die or whatever? Because everybody dies. That's why children die, and everybody dies at different times. And you just feel like it should be on your timeline when people die, right? And you know, and people say like, oh well, you know, why would God take my grandmother away from me? Because everybody's grandmother gets taken away from them. You don't care when everybody else's grandmother dies. You care that it's your grandma that it happened to. And it's once you realize, it's just this overall selfishness and self-absorption that people have, that like feeling like I need to be able to justify, or these things need to happen on my timeline and the way that I want them to happen in order for there to be something good in the world, right? But here's the thing. It's like, when you think about what a higher power is, or like God, you think God plays favorites?